Hey guys, welcome back. So now getting back into Justice League Odyssey, and it's been a minute since we talked Odyssey, but I had a couple of patrons who were asking if we can get caught up on it, and I just figured why not, so we could just sprinkle these in along the way with what we're doing. And it made sense with us wrapping on Justice League because quite a bit of this ties into there as well. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so just picking up really from where we left off, with Cyborg, Starfire, Azrael, and Jessica Cruz making their way to the machine world, which was that portion of the ghost sector which worships Cyborg. And this is another one of those things that we got a lot more clarity on recently as far as why these worlds that Brainiac collected had at some point began to worship these heroes. But when arriving into the machine worlds and heading to their capital, Zal, it was here where they were double-crossed and separated, and everyone was imprisoned except for Cyborg because they wanted to prove that he was who they believed him to be, which they would later have him do by defending himself in the arena. But also during this time, we find that the team has been followed by this mysterious figure, which isn't Darkseid this time. But this time around, as it turns out, it's a man who goes by the name of Rapture, who's following them from the Church of Azrael within the Ghost Sector. And his main reason for following them is so that he can meet who he believes to be his god, John Paul Valley, who as it turned out ended up being selected to go against Victor Stone in the arena. But for Azrael, his motivation for doing this was more so trying to help Victor and not really fight, but rather just find a way to get out of there. But with doing so, Victor went for the win and Azrael went back to jail. But it's here where Victor truly proves himself to be Cyborg, where we find out what the people from the machine worlds truly want from him. And as it turns out, what they want is ascension. And to achieve this, they've created their own mother box, of which, with the help of Victor, he would be able to convert the people of these worlds into his own likeness, so that they would be cyborgs as well, which is something that they believe that they deserved for themselves. But with asking Victor to do this, it's also going to bring him an unexpected benefit. But during this time back where Starfire and the others were being held, after Azrael was returned back to them, they found the opportunity to make their escape. But with doing so, they didn't really make it that far before more of the machine officers came to put them back, and it's here where they met and received the help from Rapture, who had been trying to catch up with them for some time in order to meet Azrael. And initially they were a bit confused because he's wearing the old Azrael armor, which we talked about in a previous video when I was giving a bit of John Paul Valley's background. But with Rapture arriving here, though he doesn't reveal his identity, and after Azrael stops him from attacking Starfire, he then introduces himself as Rapture, and he tells Azrael that he's sworn to be his loyal servant, which is something that Azrael kind of liked because everybody else has gotten people except for him at this point. Well, him and Jessica Cruz. But at this point in time where we catch up with Darkseid, who's left the Odyssey team to pursue his true intentions, because prior to this point he hasn't been completely honest with Cyborg and the others as far as the reasons that they were drawn here and really giving them a full understanding of what's going on, or even his true motive for that matter. But it's here where we find out where he's gone to this undisclosed location to meet up with Blackfire, the sister of Starfire. We then begin to find out that Darkseid is looking for some items that have been long hidden throughout the worlds of the Dark Sector, to where one of these items is hidden in Tamaran, and he's actually come here to negotiate so he can get it. And so just for a bit of reference, as a reminder, at this point in time with Darkseid, and prior to this point we went through the whole playlist of the transformation process that he went through from Darkseid War to him becoming a baby and Grail restoring him from there. But at the time where this is taking place, keep in mind that in this form he's a lot weaker than the Darkseid we're used to. Because the Darkseid we're used to, he would just come here and take it. Whatever items he needed, he would just arrive, take what he needed to take, and that would be it. But because of him not being as powerful at this point, he has to move a little differently and use a bit more guile and persuasive speech than what we're used to. But also at this point when Azrael and the others, they then catch up with Cyborg, and pretty much for the purpose so they can regroup and get out of there. And when he first sees him, he's like, yo, what's up with the two Azraels as well? He was thinking the same thing. But when they find him, before they leave, he actually wants to hook up to that mother box, and not so much for the purpose of helping these people turn into cyborgs, but also because it has the most current knowledge of the Ghost Sector, which will also be their best bet at figuring out where Darkseid went. But when he connects to this box, he pieces together the blueprint of what Darkseid is trying to put together, because one of Darkseid's plans from coming here is piecing together a new apocalypse, which, as we come to find out, that prior to Justice League No Justice, that within these worlds that the Coluans had collected, that there were worlds that were collected solely for the purpose of keeping these pieces away from Darkseid, which is what Cyborg gets a glimpse of here, letting him know what Darkseid was up to. And so also during the time that Cyborg is getting this information, it's here that we learn a bit more about Rapture as well, because it's here that we find out that he had actually killed the Tamaran worshippers, which at the time we had thought that Darkseid did, but as we come to find out, it was Rapture and the Church of Azrael, who have been searching for Azrael by any means, and even with doing so slaying other worshippers if they believed that they didn't ally with their cause. And when he shared this information with Azrael, Starfire of course heard it, and she lashed out on Rapture. But Azrael, he doesn't let Starfire attack Rapture, with Azrael believing that perhaps Rapture has just been misled, but in this case, the only thing that is misunderstood is Rapture believing that Azrael would allow him to continue. And when Azrael rebukes him for what he did, Rapture then declares Azrael to no longer be his god, saying that he betrays everything that he should stand for. And after saying that, Rapture just dips out. And when he does, like, this is one issue of many that is far from over. But as they proceed to get Cyborg out of there, we jump over to Darkseid, to whom at this time has scored a deal with Blackfire, telling her that if she allows him to get this item that he needs, not only will it save Tamaran from the end of all things, which is something that he describes as the darkness that's coming after the destruction of the Source Wall, but in addition to him telling her that this item will save them, he lets her know like once he's retrieved it, he swears that he'll never return to Tamaran again. But first he needs to get this main item which connects all the others, and as it turns out, this main item that he needs to collect, it is an item called the Other Box, and it's actually called the Other Box. And like, I'd hate to have to walk in somewhere and have to order that thing. Like, I'm looking for the Other Box. You mean the Mother Box? No, the Other Box. Oh, you mean the Father Box? No, the Other Box, man. Like, I can imagine that name's gonna confuse some people later on. But as it turns out, the way this thing works, the Other Box is like the key component that all these other relics fit into, very much like the Infinity Gauntlet. And once Darkseid collects them all, he'll then be able to build this new apocalypse, which is way bigger and crazier than the last one, but also at the helm of all this power, he'll be able to bring the multiverse to its knees. But when this is revealed to us, we also then go on to find out the true identity of Rapture, that he was the Coluan who we had seen from the beginning, who was the husband of the Green Lantern Topal, to whom his wife had died back towards the creation of the Ghost Sector. And after her death, he had returned back to the Church of Azrael, to where he had devoted himself to finding Azrael, but as it turns out at this point, he realizes that Azrael is not quite the old god that he had believed him to be. So now at this point when he returns back to the church, he tells them, and their solution is just to get rid of him altogether. And I can't help but think like their reaction being like, when they heard this, like, what? Azrael ain't down for the cause? After we done spent all these money on these outfits? Oh, it's over for him. Like, man, I knew we should have went with Batman. Like, whose idea was this anyway? But also at this time with Starfire, Cyborg, and the others, when they make their way to Tamaran, to where at their arrival they're immediately greeted by Blackfire, who at this point she sees Starfire and the others as allies of Darkseid. Which isn't exactly not true because it did kind of start like that, but Blackfire, she doesn't know that they unfriended him for the time being. And like prior to this point, like Starfire and Blackfire, they've made their amends, but fast forward to now with Tamaran being captured by the Coluans and the creation of the Ghost Sector, and Starfire seeming to be an ally of Darkseid, Blackfire's only used all these reasons to justify Starfire as her enemy, and that along with anyone else Justice League associated with them being responsible for the creation of the Ghost Sector after the events of Justice League No Justice. But while this is happening here, Darkseid, he's already moved on to collecting the first of the other pieces that he needs to join with the Other Box in order to build his new version of Apocalypse and seize the multiverse. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind here, because one, part of his reason for being here in the Dark Sector, which was during the time that Perpetua was first freed and New Genesis and Apocalypse had disappeared, and also the members of the Quintessence, they had grouped up real quick and dipped out for reasons that we still trying to figure out, as far as like what exactly they were protecting, outside of everything else we'd seen happen in Justice League. But also when this event occurred, we had also found out that Darkseid had been hiding in the Ghost Sector because the distortion fields were protecting him from that same anomaly that was taking place all over the multiverse when Perpetua was freed. And as it turns out, this Other Box, which he would describe as a contingency for the end of all things, like putting this together is more so his plan to protect himself, take what is left, and rebuild after. But as far as him finding the first piece to put together with the Other Box, as it turns out, Brainiac had put like crazy security at each location in order to keep Darkseid from getting to them. And it's crazy because like these machines that are protecting the relics, rather than looking anything like Brainiac, they look more like Ultron and Annihilus went half on the Cyborg. But with Darkseid here trying to get through them, It almost appears like for everyone that he takes down, like 2 or 3 more come in his place. But eventually Darkseid does fight his way through these things, and he continues on with his excursion. But as part of this old prophecy, which is pretty much like your Ragnarok for a 4th world. And in that prophecy it mentions that either in or near its destruction, these creatures called eschatons, who prior to this point were only said to be a myth, that they would return and they would finish the new gods, of which at this point there really are no new gods. And technically you got Darkseid, who's like the only one left, because really the whole quote unquote new god thing with Cyborg, Starfire, and Azrael, that was something that Darkseid had set up long before these worlds were captured by the Coluans. And that was really just his personal contingency, so he would have help if need be when it came to this point. But as far as the legendary eschatons, like at this point in time, they just arrived like, look bro, we at that point. And they pretty much like, look Darkseid, the new gods are gone. And Darkseid is like, well, they not all gone, you know, I'm here, shoot, like there's one left. But they like, nah bruh, you was here. Like we finna make that past tense, like quick, fast, and in a hurry. And it's really messed up because like Darkseid, he ain't really on his A game. And I mean like if he was, there's really no way to tell like how well he'd match up with them. But even with seeing how easily they overrun him here, and keeping in mind that this version of Darkseid ain't no slouch, it just kind of lets you know that these creatures ain't no joke either. And they're not gonna be that easy to get rid of. So now real quick, just want to give a shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you guys for your support. And for those of you who wanted to get back into Justice League Odyssey, we will get caught up. We're just gonna fit them in between the rest of the vids that we're doing. But I'd say overall that we should be up to speed in like the next week or so, because I don't think it'll take too long to get caught up with Odyssey. But that'll do it for this one guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.